Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Fair use is in full effect. This is for educational purposes only. Ecclesiastes 12:6. For the Most High hateth sinners, and will repay vengeance unto the ungodly, and keepeth them against the mighty day of their punishment. We drop down to 10. Never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness. So-called modern day white man, Esau Edom, is the number one enemy of the house of Israel. You can read that in Psalms 83. You can start at 1 and read on down. Never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness. Though he humble himself and go crouching, yet take good heed and beware of him. And thou shalt be unto him as if thou hast wiped a looking glass. And thou shalt know that his rust hath not been altogether wiped away. Now, we've been telling y'all that don't take that, but he came humbly. If you take this, your grandparents won't get sick. The children won't get sick. Now we got reports coming out on that first trial run of total control. Depopulation. This is from the Kim Iverson show. This is for educational purposes only. I'm going to let her do all the speaking. I ain't going to say nothing about the subject. We're just going to listen. Israel, wake up. The Lord is working his purpose on the earth. And he finna judge all the wicked. Number one being Esau Edom. This is the Kim Iverson show. We're going to play a snippet of that. Now check this out. Fair use for educational purposes only. Shalom.
Writing to report. Well, the FDA has now admitted the COVID vaccine killed kids. Dr. Vinay Prasad released a letter saying, "Dear Team Cyber, CBER, I'm writing to report," which CBER, he is the director of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. He assumed office May 6th. The Center for Biologics Evolution and Research is one of 6 main centers for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, which is part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Okay, so that is who Dr. Vinay Prasad is now in the administration. And he writes this damning letter that was released several pages long saying, "I am writing to report that OBPV career staff have found that at least 10 children have died after and because of receiving COVID-19 vaccination. These deaths are related to vaccination, likely, probable, possible attribution made by staff. That number is certainly an underestimate due to underreporting and inherent bias in attribution. This safety signal has far-reaching implications for Americans, the U.S. pandemic response, and the agency itself, which I wish to discuss here. I also want to address some frequent objections." So he goes on. This letter is very damning, and it's the first time that the FDA now acknowledges that kids have died from the actual vaccine, not some other thing, not some side thing, but from the actual vaccine. And kids were forced to take this. They were forced to take this to go to school. And now, for the first time, the FDA is acknowledging that these kids were killed, and the government essentially led them to it. And the media and the hysteria, and I'm sure neighbors and family and friends that all pushed the vaccine on everybody because people weren't thinking clearly and they weren't stopping to say, wait a minute, we don't know anything about this thing. It hasn't been on the market long. We don't know really what it does. And now you want to inject it into all of these pregnant women and children because that's what they were pushing. Infants, everybody. Oh, and you can't send your kid off to school unless they get it. So what is in this letter? I'm going to read to you just kind of the most damning parts of the letter. Besides, for the first time, the U.S. FDA will acknowledge that COVID-19 vaccines have killed American children. That is the single most damning statement in this letter that was released. This is an institutional admission of fatal harm to children, is what that is. Something that the FDA and the CDC have denied for years. And now they're saying we have the evidence and this happened. Now, the critics of this are saying, yeah, well, where is the evidence? And Dr. Vinay Prasad has not released that just yet, but I'm sure that he will. He adds, healthy young children were coerced to receive a vaccine that could result in death, which is devastating. Coercion plus government policy plus the risk that the FDA now admits equals death in children. And it was just absolutely terrifying. Also in this letter, he says the OBPV career staff have found that at least 10 children have died after and because of receiving COVID-19 vaccination. That number is clearly an underestimate. This is brutal because it directly contradicts years of public messaging that no deaths have been linked to the vaccine in children. They said that to us over and over and over again, said that we were hysterical lunatics for thinking otherwise, that we were conspiracy theorists. But it implies that there was an active suppression and or willful ignorance to the entire thing. Because if they have the evidence now and they're able to release it to us, that means there was active suppression happening. And or, like I said, willful ignorance. They could have been ignorant on it. But it shows that regulators, the people that we entrust with this job, failed to catch or report child deaths for 3 to 4 years. What we also learned from this letter is that these deaths were unknown to the public until now. Deaths were reported between 2021 and 2024 and ignored for years. That sentence alone is a scandal. It implies that these cases were not analyzed in real time. Safety surveillance was dysfunctional at best. The FDA only identified them because the new commissioner forced a review. Even more damning, he says, without this FDA commissioner, we would not have performed this investigation and identified this safety concern. Okay, so what are you saying? So basically, if leadership hadn't changed, we never would know this. What is the point of this leadership? What is the point of the people in the FDA? What is the point of the FDA? It says the FDA delayed acknowledgement of the safety signal until after it could extend marketing authorization to younger boys 12 to 15, meaning they knew or they strongly suggested or strongly suspected myocarditis was real. But they waited until after they got approval for that younger age group. So that looks like regulatory malpractice is what that looks like. He also writes, many felt this statement was dishonest and manipulative, referring to Rochelle Walensky saying there was no myocarditis signal when Israel had already sounded the alarm. Israel was the first country to get the vax. They did a data for doses deal. They were giving us all of their information. I sat through hours and hours and hours of FDA meetings with the Israelis where the doctors from Israel sat there and said, it's not working. And by the way, we are seeing some heart problems. And it was ignored. And they just continued to vote to move ahead and okay, full steam ahead. Let's continue on and do it. This implies, of course, that the CDC misled the public. They downplayed the real risks. And they potentially contributed to avoidable injuries and deaths. He says the FDA has never requested the manufacturers demonstrate in randomized fashion that vaccinating children improves these outcomes. So basically, the FDA approved COVID vaccines for children without any proof that they saved any children's lives. So they just were, oh no, we just got to give it to them. And they had no idea. And in fact, it did the opposite for 10 of those kids at least. They recommended a product without knowing the risks, no demonstrated benefits on top of that. So they didn't know the risks, but they also didn't even know the benefits. He says, we do not know if we saved lives on balance, saying that the safety profile was not adequately understood. The benefit for healthy children was never established. The program may have caused net harm, even more deaths than it prevented. So they still don't know. Did this even help at all? There was never any benefit. They didn't know if there was any benefit. There likely wasn't any benefit. He warns that many more deaths may be unreported, saying that the real number is probably higher because of VAERS. This relied on VAERS reporting. A lot of people did not report the deaths to VAERS. They were told by doctors that had nothing to do with the vaccine. It was just some other random thing that killed their kid. No real explanation. And a lot of people don't even know about VAERS, and they don't even know how to report it to VAERS. He says bluntly, healthy young children who face tremendously low risk of death were coerced to receive a vaccine that could result in death. So that's workplace mandates, school mandates, government pressure, policies, pharmaceutical lobbying, the news, friends and family, shaming, all of that. It was just a catastrophe, and a particular catastrophe for these 10 children, at least. Also, the FDA staff leaked to media to portray a scientist as a fearmonger. They said that Dr. Hogue was a fearmonger and saying that COVID-19 vaccine, he says, Dr. Vinay Prasad in the letter says, COVID-19 vaccines did result in the death of children. Dr. Hogue was correct, meaning the staff who tried to discredit her were wrong. Media narratives fed by those leaks were wrong. The FDA's internal culture punished truth-telling. And so they demonized the truth. And we saw that over and over again. It says Doctors Gruber and Krauss resigned while Gruber and Krauss preferred a risk-based, evidence-based approach. So if you remember, there were doctors that started quitting from the FDA. And he says he's saying, they resigned and it was because they actually wanted to do the right thing. And these other people just wanted to push along blindly and push vaccines blindly. And it killed people. And it didn't matter to them. But these doctors resigned, and they quit because the evidence was insufficient. Leadership wanted authorizations no matter what, and they pushed through and pushed mandates, and they didn't even have any sort of evidence to prove anything. Says this was an evidence-based catastrophe. It certainly was. He says it's horrifying to consider that U.S. vaccine regulation may have harmed more children than it saved, and that this requires humility and introspection. So this is like, right, he's basically saying we failed, kids died, and we didn't stop it. Yeah. So the question now is, will anybody listen to this? Will anybody listen to Dr. Vinay Prasad? Will they listen to this letter? Right now, the mainstream media, what are they doing? What do you think they're doing? They are demonizing this letter, saying, oh, this letter is... Oh, he doesn't provide any evidence. And, the critics are coming out of the woodwork saying, no, this isn't true. This isn't true. Of course, the vaccine saved more kids than it killed. And the fact that it killed any kids, even if it did save more kids than it killed, the fact that it killed any kids, this parents should have been aware of that there was a risk of this. But they were told over and over ad nauseum by everybody, there was no risk and you were a conspiracy theorist if you thought otherwise. And now you go tell that to those 10 families and I guarantee you that there are at least a few of those parents that think, or if not all, that think, if I had to do it again, I wouldn't have given them the vaccine. Kids were not at risk of COVID, but I gave them the vaccine. I was bullied into it, or I was pressured into it, or I wanted to do it, and now my kid is gone. Just absolutely terrible that this happened, and it's terrible that this happened to these children and these parents, and that kids were forced into this, and we just didn't even have the safety. We didn't have any evidence at all for these vaccines for anybody, let alone kids, and let alone pregnant women, and all of those miscarriages that have now, skyrocketed, and And there's no, all these pregnant women that went and got the vaccine because their doctors told them that's what they should do, or the media told them that's what they should do. And now they don't, their kids are gone. Their kids are gone. Just really devastating, really.
Told you, the scriptures are true every time. Psalms 83:4, they have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. The nation of Israel, so-called Native Americans, so-called African Americans, and so-called Latinos. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee, the tabernacles of Edom, so-called modern-day white man, and the Ishmaelites, so-called Arabs, of Moab, the Chinese, so-called Chinese, and the Hagarenes, Hamites, Gabal, Hamites, and Ammon, the so-called Japanese, and Amalek, the crown coverers, the small hats, the 48 fakers, the head tribe of Esau, Edom, the only ones on earth you can't say nothing about, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre, more Hamites. The book of Job 13:4, but ye are forgers of lies. Ye are all physicians of no value. We told you. The scriptures are true every time. Isaiah 31:1. Through the Spirit, America is Egypt. Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help and stay on horses and trust in chariots because they are many, and in the horsemen because they are very strong. But they look not unto the Holy One of Israel, neither seek Yahweh. Yet he also is wise and will bring evil meaning bad times, and will not call back his words, but will arise against the house of the evildoers and against the help of them that work iniquity. Well, woe to them that they go down to Egypt for help. That's what a lot of Jake did, so-called African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans. They put that fear in your heart when the only person you're supposed to fear is the Almighty Yahweh, by Hashem Yahweh Shai. And look at the end result. The truth gonna continue to come out. This is for educational purposes only. The Kim Iverson Show. Shalom.